Good morning, Instagram, and welcome to the Trish Lynn Show. Give it in, wow, oh my gosh. Give Instagram a minute to catch up. Let everyone know that we are live. Today we are talking about generational trauma, healing generational trauma, and breaking cycles. So, we will get started once we can get this once I can get this working. To dive into this topic. There we go. Okay, and Instagram is still notifying that we are live, but we are good to go and we can kind of jump in. How are
Great.
you?
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. Good. It's so great to be here. I'm glad that we are having this conversation today.
Yes, it is going to be. I think I say this about every episode, but still, I love these conversations. Like every conversation seems to be so incredible, and there seems to be so much knowledge that everyone can walk away with. So I'd love to let you introduce yourself, share a little bit about who you are and what you do with the audience.
Okay, sounds great. So my name is Jody Solberg, and I am a certified master hypnotherapist. I've been in mental and behavioral health for 25 years, and I've been a hypnotherapist for 23 of those years. And my background is in helping specifically individuals and families, so all ages, to be able to move through things like trauma, anxiety, burnout, and neurodiversity, and helping them break those generational cycles is definitely my passion and something that has been a focus for me throughout my entire career.
I love that. I love that. Now, for me, so I don't know how much of the show you've watched and how much of my story you've seen, but leaving my relationship, my marriage was breaking a generational pattern for me. So it has been so difficult, and maybe you can take the lead here and explain to the audience why breaking that generational pattern is so much harder than one that's not.
Yeah. Well, when we're trying to break any kind of habits or make any kind of change, we're creating a new path. And so the way I like to describe it is that old path, even if it was not a generational cycle, even if it was something that has just been formed, for many years, we have this neural pathway in our brains that's like a super highway at this point because we've gone down it so many times. And when you're trying to create a new pathway, a new habit, a new thought, a new belief, you're creating a new neural pathway, and it is kind of like a path. I live in the woods, so I like to think of it as like a trail. And you're forging this new trail, and it's not a trail yet. There's, brush and trees and things everywhere, and you're really having to, get scratched up and tromp things down and push things aside. And then the more you use that path, intentionally, because you have to make a choice at this point, to use that path instead of taking the easier superhighway, then it gets worn in a little bit more every single time. So every single time you're going down that path, things start to stop growing in that area. You're able to navigate a little more smoothly. And over time, eventually, it'll, become a trail and like a dirt road, and then it'll get graveled, and then it'll get paved, and then someday that can be its own highway. But we have to intentionally choose it because the old path doesn't go away. And when we're talking about generational traumas, then we're talking about things that have been ingrained in us since before we were born. So there are things that, at our very most impressionable, we're little subconscious sponges when we're in the womb and then in our early ages of life. When we are born, then those are things that we're learning about ourselves, about our relationships, how relationships work, right? What does that look like? What are our beliefs about ourselves and our situation in the world around us? And those are being formed on a very primitive level. We typically don't always have cognitive memories where we have the verbalization for it until we're, over 2, so maybe 3 years old. But before that, womb to 2, we still have them. They're just in our subconscious and in our
Mhm.
bodies. And so these are things that they said were formed when our brains were being formed, truly. And so it can be challenging to break that, and it takes a lot of intention and time and self compassion and awareness. It really takes awareness as that first step so that then you can pause and choose how to respond and choose the new path. But it's not an easy path to choose, especially at first, because that's all you've known.
I love I feel like you literally just took all of the words that I say and repeated them, and I love it because that's what it is. It's having that level of self awareness, not only of what you are going through, but the whole situation that is going on. So for me, it was that level of self awareness to recognize this is a toxic relationship. This isn't healthy. This isn't normal. And then make my decisions. Oh, I froze. Am I back now?
I think you're back now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know where I got cut off there. But make
You're
okay
good.
to make my decisions, how I want to move forward. What do I want my life to look like now that I've recognized, hey, this is not healthy. This is not a healthy relationship. These are not healthy experiences. I get to make these decisions. But having it being a generational pattern, it was looking back, and I didn't really so much recognize that it was a generational pattern until my mom started opening up and sharing, a little bit more about my dad and how things were. And then you start to recognize, hey, this goes back. And hey, this goes back again. And
Yeah.
and you get to see, I've gone back to my grandfather, so I don't know what it was like prior to him, but this is the generational pattern of toxic men. And
Mhm.
I am breaking that cycle for my daughter.
Yeah, and that's amazing because as soon as you have that awareness, when somebody has that and then they choose to make that change, it changes it for generations to come. Like you said, you can point going back a couple generations because you can learn about their experiences. So now, okay, this is a pattern that's been going on for quite a long time. Well, now with you making that change, it's your daughter, but then it's also the next generation and the next,
Yeah.
and it going because you broke that chain.
Yeah.
And so even though it's a lot of work to do it, it's so worth it for you, but also that ripple effect that you start creating.
Yeah. And, the healing work is a piece that a lot of people don't want to step into. They don't want to actually acknowledge and do the work. For me, it is acknowledging what needs to be done so that for the future generations, for, not only my daughter, but both of my boys to see, hey, this is how women are treated. This is how women are supposed to be treated. So breaking that pattern for them moving forward of watching, they didn't get to, my dad passed away when I was 9, so that's something they will never get to experience. But watching my ex and then my grandfather and having them move on, their grandfather on his side is completely different, which is nice for them to see. But it's those pieces, not only for my daughter to see, this is not how women are meant to be treated, and breaking that for her, doing the healing work for her, because it is generational and it is stored. I had an energy clearing session done, and it was incredible, the pieces that she tapped into from generations upon generations upon generations. It went back some astronomical number of
Wow.
something that was still stored in my body and had been passed along, and she cleared it.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's a beautiful feeling moving forward for my daughter, because it's something she doesn't have to carry now with her.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so incredible to not even realize how far back these things can go because that's how we learn, right? We learn from modeling
Yeah.
and we're, like I said, absorbing all of these things and we're watching. Now, your boys will see that that isn't their
Yeah.
normal. What you experienced, because you said it took a while to figure out this isn't healthy, but this isn't how everyone else's
Yeah.
relationships are. This isn't how it works for everyone, because when that's all you know, you don't realize that. You don't see
Yeah.
outside of that. And then that just gets passed on because when, they always have that saying, when we know better, we can do better,
Yeah.
right? We can learn and we can grow and we can adapt. And there's no expiration date to that. We can always change. That ability for our brains to change, with that neuroplasticity is what that's called, is endless. We can always make that shift, but it does take that time and attention once you have that awareness, and you have to choose it over and over and over again until it becomes your normal.
Yeah.
And so they're going to see that, and they're going to see, like you said, this is how you treat women. This is how healthy relationships work. And that's what breaks that cycle. It just breaks that pattern, because all of a sudden, that's not what's normal in your family anymore.
Yeah. And it was, for me, it was difficult to see in the beginning. I didn't know what a narcissist was. I didn't know what narcissistic traits were. And then learning all of the pieces, with the trauma bond and all of like those chemical processes that mess with your head even more. It was a really big learning experience for me. And like the beginning of our relationship was good, but now I can see how it changed over time and mirrored the generational pieces from before. And
It's slow. It's a slow process. Like you said,
such a slow.
it's not like, oh, it's been bad since day one. I always think this is, I apologize to the vegans watching, because this is a very morbid type of analogy, but if you've ever heard about, the frog, right, in water, if you boil a frog, which I don't recommend, but if you do, you start off cold, they'll jump right out
Yeah.
if it's hot. Can't do that. And so, it's like that. It's like being in that water where it's like, oh, this is nice. And this is, cozy. And I'm getting, all the love bombing. And here's all, you don't know that's what it is at first, but, you
Yeah.
know, all this attention, and this person cares about me, and they're, spending all this time and attention on me and pouring love on me, and it's great. And then the temperature starts to go up, and it's so gradual that you don't know until it's boiling, until it's too late.
Yeah. And then you feel stuck and you feel like there's no way out.
Exactly.
And that's the hard piece, because now that's the pattern that you are trying to break.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, and that is the hard part, is seeing it, because everybody else around you might see it first, because they're on the outside of that pot. They're on the outside. They can't see that. A much nicer metaphor for that is, I always think of it as the snow globe of our lives, where, inside the snow globe is a little blizzard. You shake up the
Yeah.
snow globe, and there's a little blizzard, and you can't see from the outside like other people can. You can't see because you're in the blizzard
Yeah.
in the moment. And so it takes something usually for you to be able to see that. It takes enough of seeing other things around you and realizing, hey, this isn't what I thought it was, or other people calling that out and saying, hey, what's going on with this? And because you get so isolated,
Yeah.
right? It's very isolating in those types of relationships. And so you're not seeing those other things for quite a long time. And, a lot of women specifically that I work with will beat themselves up afterwards. And why didn't I see it sooner? Why didn't I? And it's so important to know that you don't know until you do, until you can see that and have that moment of awareness. It's not your fault. You have that pattern. You fell into this because, again, it was a slow heating
Yeah.
up situation that you could not have seen it coming. But it is interesting. I'm sure you can speak to this, that once you see it, you can't unsee it.
You cannot unsee it. And it was pointed out to me, the pattern. And I didn't see it in the beginning. You know, this is over 16 years of my life. I have 3 kids. And it was either, you know, there's a massive blow up and a new house, or a massive blow up and a kid, or a massive blow up and a vehicle. Between houses, kids, and vehicles, I have 3 kids. I've had quite a few new vehicles. And we lived in 4 houses together over 16 years. It was always something. And that was a pattern that I couldn't unsee. I was like, oh, wait a second. And then I started expecting it. And once I recognized the pattern, I was like, okay, I've got to do the work. And, you know, for me leaving, the work started before I left, because of the trauma bond and those chemical processes that go on in your brain. I knew I left and I'd come back, left, come back, left, come back. I knew if I was going to actually leave, I had to do the work on myself to start rewiring those pathways so that when I left, I could actually stay gone.
Absolutely. It's not like a switch that just flips.
No.
You know, where, yeah, you see it and then you can just walk away, because it takes that time.
Yeah.
And it takes that compassion for yourself, and the growth and figuring out, like, what does that look like? It takes planning. It really does. You know, it's a lot of work to get to that point of, how can I see myself outside of this, and how can I function outside? What does that look like? What does that feel like? So that you can, like you said, have that courage and that knowing that, yes, I can go,
Yeah.
and I'm okay outside of it, and I don't have to feel like I need to go back, because that is known. So it's hard to walk away and have this new normal that's completely outside your comfort zone. I mean, obviously, it is not comfortable to be in a toxic, abusive relationship, but it is in the comfort ever.
And it's choosing, you know, it's choosing, well, where do I want to be uncomfortable? Do I want to be uncomfortable walking on eggshells every single day, not knowing when the next blow up is going to happen or what I'm going to get shit on for? Or do I want to be uncomfortable making this change in my life where I get to heal and be happy? You know, for me, it was growing my business and doing all of the things that I want to actually do, which you do still feel guilty for. I still have moments where I'm like,
It's
I
all,
want to go.
and you're like, but how can it be? Because it's been drilled into you for so long that that's shameful, or you should feel guilty for taking care of yourself.
Yeah. And, you know, something as simple as reading a book. Over the July long weekend here, I read this massive book in 3 days. That's all I did. I sat outside and I read, or I would lay in bed and read. And it was so wonderful and so relaxing. But I felt guilty because all I did was sit and read a book. And
Mm-hmm.
prior to that, if I was reading, one, I was laughed at because I was reading instead of watching whatever he wanted to watch on TV. So that's already ingrained in my mind of, well, I'm doing what I want to do. So you feel guilty for doing what you want to do when you shouldn't feel guilty for it at all.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the most challenging things. Sometimes it seems so simple, but it's not. When you are coming out of a relationship like that and figuring out what you like, what you want to do, and not feeling guilty for that. You know, one of the hardest things often for my clients coming out of those types of relationships to do is to simply be okay with liking what they like.
Yeah.
And they have to reconnect, right? You have to reconnect with who you are.
Yeah.
What do you like? What do you want to do? Because like you said, you often have been, you know, criticized and ridiculed for that, or been made to feel like you're being, you know, lazy if you're not being productive, not doing what they want you to do. And so, like I said, just reading a book for those 3 days, giving yourself permission to do what you wanted and just sit outside and read that book is such a healing thing in and of itself.
It's so healing, and it's so difficult at the same time because you're feeling guilty, and it's being able to take that step back, because that's the biggest piece when you leave a toxic relationship, is coming back to, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
The biggest question, the biggest piece of work that I get to do with my clients is the identity work of, well, who are you? Because you're not the same person you were before. You're you get to now decide, well, what do I like? What do I want to do? What do I want to do with my life? Where am I going? Who do I want to be? And we
Mm.
get to uncover all of these questions, and we get to go through these experiences. And, you know, especially growing a business, the women I work with are growing businesses here in the online space. Well, these are the big pieces to authentically show up as you in the online space and attract those clients that you want to bring in to your work, because authenticity is what sells. But you have to come back to that beginning piece of, who am I, to be authentic.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to know that first. And so that is a journey. It is a whole process. Again, it's not an overnight thing to discovery, and you get to do it. You
Yeah.
get to release all those shoulds and have tos and pressures and expectations. And it's hard to do that, but when you do, it's so freeing, and you can really start connecting with who you are, who you want to be.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I had a question for you, and it just slipped my mind because
Okay.
I was listening. This is
Hey, that's that's great. And it will come back to you. It always
yeah.
does.
No, I don't remember what it was at all. Okay, let's just move forward as if I didn't
I
have
have
a question.
for you. How does
Yeah,
that sound? We'll do that.
yeah.
What has the impact been that you've seen, like your kids,
Yeah.
their response, I guess, or just, how they're now different because you are stepping into who you authentically are and into you finding your own voice and your power. Like, what effect has that had? Because we're talking about breaking these
Yep.
generational cycles. That effect will last for lifetimes and generations. But what are you already seeing just from them seeing their mom do this?
So my daughter is with me full time.
Mm-hmm.
And for now, in 2 weeks, we're going back to 50-50. But watching her become who she is and be
Of
able to say what she wants to say within reason. She's very sassy.
course. Yeah.
But watching her just to, she's so independent now, and she has her own style, and she doesn't feel like she has to change who she is. Where when I was still in that relationship, everything was very censored
Yeah.
because, we had to fit this perfect little mold. They watched mom have to fit this perfect little mold. My business when I was in that relationship was considered a hobby. And
Mm-hmm.
there was no support. So now I'm starting to recognize them. When I say mom has to work, mom has work to do. It's not something bad. There's no negative comments that come along with it. And that's for both of my boys. My daughter's like, yeah, okay, I'm going outside to play. She doesn't really care. But
Mm-hmm. But the boys too are starting to respect that you have your work
yeah,
and that it's important for you. Yeah.
yeah. My oldest and I actually had it out in February, I believe. We had one major argument because it was that power struggle with him. That's what he had seen for 15 years of his life growing up, 14 years, I guess, because he was still 14. But that's what he had seen is, dad talk down to mom and, always look down on me. So it was that power struggle between him and I, and we had it out. And I made sure it was known that I was the parent, not him, and this is how it was going to be under my roof. And the level of respect from him since that moment has been unexplainable, to
Wow.
the point that outside sources have seen his behavior and his attitude towards me now, and it's a what the fuck happened, because
Mm-hmm.
he is a completely different kid, and the level of respect went from like here to way up here.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it has been, to be honest, it is one of my favorite things to talk about and share about, because it makes me so happy as a parent to have that relationship with him. And it is, yeah, that is one of the biggest changes I have seen.
Yeah. See, and that's the thing. You will see those impacts pretty quickly. You know, and again, the relationship with you, because what has he seen? Like you said, what has he seen modeled? How it's okay to treat you. And you set that line.
Yeah.
And so you said that's, and this is now how it's going to be. And you stepped up for yourself
Yeah.
and expected that. And that's really amazing that that just shifted the dynamic. And like I said, your daughter is so wonderful because she, like, how old is she now? She's
She's
younger.
8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, she's not going to grow up feeling that and seeing that because we internalize as
Yeah.
kids, right? Especially as girls because they identify directly with you
Yeah.
of, oh, if this is how mom's treated, this is how I am going to be treated.
Yeah.
And so, you know, now she's going to know, oh, that's not okay from such a young
Yeah.
age, which is, but yeah, that is such an important time in your son's life. That
Yeah.
shift at this age is so important because it's never too late. That's one of the things I love talking to parents about. Like, it doesn't matter. I mean, it does, obviously, but it doesn't matter what age someone's at. It matters, yes, what happened before, and it's changeable. So it doesn't matter how old or young we are, change can still happen, right? That change is not something where there's an expiration date on it, you know, where your kids are just set in stone.
Yeah.
You know, we're all able to make those shifts. So
Yeah.
you making those changes allowed them to think a new thought, see something different,
Yeah.
believe something different, and they can make that change too.
Yeah.
So yeah, while everything still stays with us that we've been through, it doesn't mean that things can't change for us and for all generations to come.
Yeah. And we get to make those changes and we get to choose to have the life that we want to have moving forward. Yes. And I love because I don't disregard anything that's happened to any of the women I work with. This is a part of our story. This is a part of what we have been through. We get to acknowledge this. We're not going to live in that pain, but we are going to use it to empower ourselves to continue moving forward and grow from that experience. I mean, a lot of people can be stuck in this mindset of, well, this happened to me, I'm going to stay in victim mode. For me, I look at my experiences, you know, this is 16 years of my life, but this is an empowering moment for me to step forward and share my experiences with women who may still be in it, may have just come out of it, maybe out of it for a couple years now or more, but there is still a lot that they are holding on to that they don't recognize they are holding on to.
Absolutely.
And getting to share is a beautiful thing for me.
Yeah. It doesn't have to continue to be your identity. And that's one of the things that I think is surprising sometimes for women that I work with is they don't realize that their self-talk isn't actually theirs.
Yes.
Their self-talk was actually their abusers' words that they now internalized and started to say to themselves. And that can keep you in that identity. And so, like I said, it's important to acknowledge everything that you've been through and to be able to learn and grow from that, but also to realize it doesn't have to be who you are forever.
Yeah.
You know, that you get to choose to think differently about yourself, to treat yourself differently. And when you can start to shift that narrative, you start to shift the way you're speaking to yourself and you're treating yourself, then everything around you can change. And it's still a part of who you are, and it's still an important piece of your history, but it isn't all of who you are. And get to move forward from that.
Yeah. And it's funny, the thoughts, I've still had a lot of thoughts that come through and I'm like, wait a second, I don't think that. Why is that popping into my head? And I'm like, that's not mine.
That's right. Absolutely. That's what I teach my clients
Yeah.
is to have that awareness, then you can recognize. And then when those
Yeah.
thoughts come up, then you can think, okay, is this mine?
Yeah.
Where is this? You know, where did this come from? Because once you've heard something, that repetition, once you've heard that so many times, it just starts replaying. And again, that automatic path
Yeah.
that I talked about at the beginning, that never goes away
No.
completely. once you stop using it as often, things do get pruned over time. Some of those little neural pathways start to get overgrown. Those are the ones that then have all the weeds in them, and we're choosing this other path, but it doesn't go away completely. It's
Yeah.
a part of who have been in the past. But when that thought comes up, you're able then to pause and choose how to respond. And it really is the power of that second thought that's the most important.
Yeah.
That automatic one may come up because of that history, and then you can choose that new path every
Yeah.
single time. And the more you do it, the stronger that becomes. And then those things won't come up as often. And it's a gift that our brains are able to make those shifts and those changes, and that through you making these changes now, it is held in our bodies, it is held in our genetics, as well as in our subconscious and in those pathways that were formed. And so you doing this now, your daughter and your sons, when someday if they have kids, that doesn't have to get passed
Yeah.
on. And that's really the core of it, is looking at when a mom's thinking, well, I'm feeling so guilty for taking care of myself and doing all this work and focusing on myself. That's what I talk about. That's what we focus on, is yes, you're doing this for yourself, and that's important in and of itself, is how to take care of yourself first, so that you can model these things, so that you can
Yeah.
show up at your best for your kids and for everyone around you. And that this is something that's a gift that's going to last a
Yeah.
lifetime, that it's not selfish. Yes, it's for you, and it will keep going.
And your kids thrive. When mom is happy, your kids are happy. And that's a big piece that we all don't, especially when you go through the separation process, you don't even think about it. Like, a lot of us stay for the kids, but we're not happy, so they're not happy.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I'm happy, they are happy. They have moments where, I want a normal family. I'm like, well, what is a normal family? Because
True.
that fighting was not normal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's being able to point those pieces out for them as well. That has been really, especially Emma, like that was 2 months ago now, maybe. That was something she said to me. I just want to be a normal family again. I'm like, but Emma, what is a normal family?
Mm-hmm.
Because that fighting was not normal.
Yeah.
And, the things that they've witnessed were not normal.
Yeah, exactly. There's a difference. So you having that conversation, normal versus healthy.
Yeah.
We get to choose what our normal is. And nowadays, I mean, there isn't like the standard nuclear, family. It really is about, like you said, being healthy versus staying in a situation that's toxic for everyone,
Yeah.
just because it looks a certain way from the outside.
Yeah.
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 That's a huge distinction. And that's a great lesson for her, to like ask the questions.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you? Like,
Yeah.
what let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And and there is a grieving process for you as well as for them. There's always that element, whether it's with your parents and your siblings, or with when you're talking about leaving a romantic partnership. There's always that element of grief over what it could have been.
Yes.
The relationship you wish you
Yeah.
had with people. That there's a lot of trauma, yes, and things that happened that weren't healthy, that shouldn't have, but then also the things that you wish happened that didn't, or the things that were that healthy relationship that you have in your mind, that it sounds like she had in her mind,
Yeah.
what that looks like. And so it is that grieving process over that's not what it
Yeah.
is. Okay, it's important to move through that and to process that, and then to embrace the healthy situations you can create for yourself now. But that does makes sense that she would feel that way of, it wasn't that she missed the fighting and the toxicity, it was the ideal.
Yes.
Ben.
And for a lot of us women who stay in these toxic relationships, it is that perception of, you can see how good you see the goodness in the person you're with.
Yeah.
That will never change. I saw the good in him, but over and over and over again, he showed me that's not him. I
Mm,
can see it's there, but that's the perception of what I want. It's not who he's giving me.
yeah, it's like these glimmers, right?
Yes.
See that, and it gives you this hope that you can create that relationship that you want. But there's that saying that people show you who they are, believe
Yeah.
them. When somebody shows you consistently that, yeah, there's how he could
Yeah.
be, but actually is. And that consistently coming back up. But like you said, when there's, the big blow up, and then, oh, let's, get the new car, then there's something that's the distraction
Yeah.
of, well, here, let's make it all okay with
Yeah.
this. Then it's hard because there is that push pull between what you hope it is versus the reality of that roller coaster when it comes down the other side.
Yeah. And your body gets trapped in that cycle with the emotions and the chemicals and like all of the processes. You get trapped in it. So it's being able to forge that new path. And I do kind of remember my question.
Okay.
And it'll be a great question to kind of close the episode with as well. Now that I remember, which is perfect.
Good.
I love your analogy for forging that new path through the brush and everything. Like, that is a beautiful analogy. In the healing process, how would you recommend someone get started creating that new path?
I would start with the thoughts and the self-talk. So that's what I recommend. So starting to recognize the awareness is that first step. And so starting to recognize the path that you've been going on, starting to recognize what are those thoughts and what are the words that are coming in and going out, because that is going to reflect what those beliefs are, right? So your underlying kind of core roots of those beliefs about yourself, about relationships, all of those things that have been passed down, it's going to come out in the self-talk. And so starting to recognize that and starting to write it down, even, writing down, like, as things are coming up, like, what am I saying to myself, about my relationships, about the world around me, like those things to start recognizing. And then you can start looking at them from the outside perspective. So we're going to start looking from the outside and seeing, is this true? Or is this been my perception, or is this somebody else? Self-talk, like we were talking, is this somebody else's words that have now become self-talk? And where's this coming from? Because then we can choose to respond differently. And one of the things too that goes along with that I would love to share with everyone is one of the exercises that I have people do when I'm working with them as clients is to write down the top 10 influences. So, and some people will say, well, that doesn't influence me. Okay, so it does. So we're just gonna set that aside for a moment, because anything or anyone you spend a lot of time with is an influence. So the people you spend the most time with and you're the closest to. It can be things like social media, or things that you're watching or listening to, anything that you're spending the most time around. So 10 of those things. And then next to them, I want you to really think about a plus, a minus, or an equal sign putting next to them. Okay. So think about, do you feel better about yourself, your situation, and the world around you after you spend time with that person or with that influence, whatever it is? Plus sign if you feel better about yourself, your situation in the world. Minus if you feel worse. And equals if it doesn't change. Okay. And do that with everything, and see what are those toxic or unhealthy situations or people or things that are making you feel worse about yourself. There's some things that can spark a lot of comparison, for
Mm-hmm.
example, and feelings of unworthiness, or perhaps it is how someone's treating you, situation you're in. And I understand that sometimes those people and those influences, and some of the ones that are negatives, are going to be people really close to you. And it is completely someone's choice whether or not they walk away and cut those people out.
Mm-hmm.
However, you can limit interactions, you can limit conversations. There's a certain amount of interaction that I completely understand that people still have to co-parenting with an abusive or toxic ex. Right?
Yeah.
You limit the interactions, the kinds of conversations, you make those choices. Same thing with parents, siblings. Right? There's some times where maybe we stay away from this type of conversation,
Yeah.
turn this off because it doesn't make us feel great. So figuring that out is going to help with those influences. And then again, the self-talk. After you're with those people, what are those thoughts that are in your head?
Yeah.
And so yeah, once we recognize those, forming that new path, once the awareness is there, forming that new path is choosing how to respond to it. How are you going to shift that self-talk when that second thought that I was talking about, when the first automatic one pops up,
Yeah.
what's the response going to be to it? And start crafting those. And often it isn't just like, oh, I, feel unworthy and now I'm completely confident. It isn't that switch flip. Like I mentioned earlier, it might be I'm learning how to do this. I'm figuring out who I am. I'm growing in this area. You're moving towards who you're becoming. That's okay. So learning, growing, figuring it out, start to tell yourself those things, that you are capable, that you can make those changes, that you can do something different. And that's telling your subconscious mind who you are. Every time you say I, or you're, telling yourself something in your self-talk about your life, about yourself, you are telling yourself who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And often do it in a way that is unchangeable, or it's the perception
Yeah.
of it being. And so even just starting to think like, I can figure this out. I can learn who I really am.
Mm-hmm.
I can figure out how to have a healthy relationship. I can learn this. It's going to be okay. You start to tell yourself those things, and then your subconscious starts to move you towards it. And so that's how I would start to just form that path, and then repetition. Just keep choosing,
Doing it.
because yeah, it does take that time. It takes that intention and it takes consistency. But again, it's so worth it.
Yeah. It is. It really is. I love to, some of my favorite things say, I am confident, or ask a question. I will often, if I'm stuck on something, I will throw it out there to the universe and, just who am I?
Great
Ask a question. Open it up. If I'm looking at a strategy and something's not working, I'm like, what can I do to make this work? And I throw the question out there and I walk away from it, because it's when you walk away, everything starts to just work.
Yeah.
And it comes through. Instead of sitting there forcing it, it just starts to all come through. And it's that the power in your thoughts and your self-talk and the things that you can, say and ask yourself
Mm-hmm.
is incredible.
It is.
It's absolutely incredible.
The reason why that works so well, I love those questions, by the way, is because you are giving your subconscious a job.
Yeah.
And so you're either telling telling your subconscious who you are, and it believes you that it's true, and it will look for every bit of evidence to back that up, whether it's positive or negative. But if you ask it a question, your subconscious will start looking for the answers.
Yes.
Just go to work for you, basically. And the thing that I would add to that is make sure that those are open-ended questions.
Yeah.
Why questions come with a lot of judgment. So it can feel heavy, and it can feel like, why did I do that? Why, can't I? But, like you said, you focused on what can I do?
Yeah.
why can I do this? And we'll look for all the evidence to back that up of why you can. And so focusing on what you can do versus what you can,
Yeah.
what you want more of versus what you want less of,
Yeah.
asking those wonderful open-ended questions. Like you said, if you don't know the answer yet, just ask the question and walk away and allow that to be revealed to you. So that is such a great practice.
Our subconscious mind, I think that could be a whole episode. Our subconscious mind is so powerful, and it's a piece that we don't even, really recognize or think about. And there's so much power there. There's so much power in your mind. Your subconscious is always looking for the portals of possibility. Like, we are all unlimited to what is available to us. The only limit is our thoughts, and closing off and looking at the negative that creates more negative versus let's open up those questions. Let's look at the positive. Let's look for what's working, because when we look for what's working, we create more of what's working, and we open up those portals to what is working.
Absolutely.
That could be a whole new conversation, and I think I might have to set that up. But
set that up, because as a hypnotherapist, that's where I live. Is right.
Yeah. Okay, so we are going to set that up. So everyone who has jumped in, stay tuned. There will be another episode coming on the subconscious mind, because mindset work is something I love diving into, and I'm a little bit of a nerd about. I don't have the training behind it, but there is a lot of knowledge there.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely have that.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for everyone who jumped in on the episode. Don't forget to comment and share if there's anyone you know that this would resonate with, and I will drop your information in the caption, so anyone who resonated with anything that you had to say can reach out to you and connect with you.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. They can find me at Psyched Up Success anywhere. And so thank you for sharing. Thank you for having me on here today with you, and thanks everybody for watching.
Yes. Okay, awesome. Bye.
Everyone.